let us get to the expert.
Now, time to get expert player breakdown directly from Canada's sports leader. Game Points welcomes TSN.ca producer and writer Scott Cullen.
As he pulls up in his chariot. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you, Matthew?
Very good. I love that intro.
Yeah.
What are you laughing, Mo?
It's like I'm listening to the USC fight song over here.
I know.
And Scott Cullen's coming through the tunnel at the Coliseum.
I know. It's pretty impressive. Nobody has an intro like that for you, huh, Scott?
No, this is the only one.
All right. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. All right.
Yeah.
Obviously, a very busy week for yourself, certainly with all the fantasy sports to cover. Certainly hockey, I guess, is tapered back a little bit. Or is it? How are you handling the fantasy hockey side of things right now for TSN.ca with all these guys playing all over Europe? Do you find that people are still doing their drafts or they're postponing a little bit?
Well, it does appear that people are still doing some drafts. I mean, I haven't even put my projections on TSN.ca yet. Sort of, they're probably coming soon, but I'm kind of waiting to see how many games they're actually going to play before going online with them. But I still get questions, pretty regularly from people who are getting ready for their drafts and so on.
And you're thinking to yourself, what the hell are you doing?
Well, in some ways, yeah. I'm like, I have no idea. Why don't we wait and see what happens?
Yeah.
If there's even going to be a season. How about that?
Right. They're like, who's Rick Nash going to play with this year? You're like, I don't know if there's going to be a this year.
He's going to play with Joe Thornton in Switzerland.
Scott Cullen doing the Swiss League fantasy report here on Game Points.
Well, I've had other guys asking about whether they want to do AHL fantasy and stuff. I mean, there's some desperate hockey fans here who need their fix.
You know what? That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, will there be a who's the number one pick there? Would it be Nugent Hopkins? I mean, who are we going with? Jeff Skinner, probably?
Eberle.
Well, yeah, like there are a lot of these really good young players that are going to be in the league. So, like I said a few weeks back, that as much as I want the NHL to get their act together and come to a deal, I'm kind of intrigued by the rosters that they'll have in the AHL this year.
I think it's going to be someone, a veteran who's not in the NHL right now, maybe like
Keith the Coin.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, let's enough of this nonsense, Scott. Let's talk some football here on the show. NFL replacement referees aside, it's been exciting, isn't it, so far for fantasy football? In terms of the rookie impact, we've seen some rookies put up some decent numbers. Russell Wilson's a guy that's intriguing, not really a gangbuster as of yet. Running back for Tampa Bay, Doug Martin's been a decent guy. Who are you liking from the rookie crop?
Well, I mean, I think the most obvious is Robert Griffin III. And I know expectations were really high for him coming in, and both he and Andrew Luck as the top two picks in the draft, there were really high expectations, but I don't know that anyone expected Griffin III to be as productive as he is. And what really sets him apart is that, he can pass for a few hundred yards and maybe throw a few touchdown passes, but he runs so well. By comparison to all the other quarterbacks, he's run for over 200 yards. I think Michael Vick is second among quarterbacks. He has 94 yards. There's a real sizable gap there, and for fantasy purposes, that really adds value to Robert Griffin III. So I mean, he's sort of the biggest impact guy because he also plays at a position that makes the biggest difference in fantasy these days.
Chatting with Scott Cullen of TSN. TSN Scott Cullen is his Twitter handle if you want to tweet at him any of the questions out there. All right, elsewhere in the NFL, certainly a lot of running back injuries, as is the case usually every year. You got Tashard Choice potentially being of use this week. Willis McGahee battling rib injuries, so what's going to happen there in Denver? Do you find that the injuries are piling up more than previous years, or is it about the same right now from a fantasy perspective?
Well, I don't know if it's any more than in previous years because we always kind of go through stretches where real significant players get hurt. But I think what you're finding, particularly when it comes to running backs, is teams are so used to running with multiple running backs now that in the case of Denver, so if they lose Willis McGahee, the rib injury, if it happens to keep him out for a little while, well, they've got guys there who can come in and carry the load a little bit. There's no Sean Moreno and Ronnie Hillman and Alan Ball. They've got all these guys who might be able to handle a few carries and look what happened last week with the Giants, right? Where Andre Brown comes in for Ahmad Bradshaw, and all of a sudden, the Giants have a viable option now in addition to Bradshaw, now that Bradshaw is expected to be healthy. And there are a lot of teams that kind of handle their running backs that way now. So, the fact that, any one of these guys might miss a little time, there's usually another plug-and-play type guy that you just pop into the lineup.
Scott, to further elaborate on the running backs, in particular Chris Johnson, you look at his totals this year, I think like 34 carries, 41 yards, whatever the number is here. Looking at it from a fantasy owner perspective here, what do you do with Chris Johnson? Do you still play him as one of your 3 RBs, or do you want to bench him because of his low output?
Well, I mean, a lot of people are asking whether they should try and trade him, and I think if you have him, you're kind of stuck with Chris Johnson because, you're not going to get any kind of value. So,
Yeah, sorry to cut you off there, Scott. If somebody's asking if they should trade Chris Johnson, I mean, this is a situation where that guy's just not experienced. I mean, how does he think he's going to get anything at that point? You wait till he has one good week, then you trade him.
Well, yeah, at the very least, right? If he goes out and has a big game, then maybe you can salvage some value. But to Mo's question, this week they're playing Houston, which is a bad matchup, for most teams. So, I'd be inclined, if you have other options, I'd actually consider sitting Chris Johnson, which, seems preposterous, but given what he's done so far, I think you can justify it. And, you combine low production with a strong opponent this week, sit him down, and if this happens to be the week that he is productive, well then, maybe some value starts to come back.
Scott, do you have a disappointing guy, offensive guy, doesn't matter the position, that you're looking to maybe turn things around beginning in week 4, somebody who's underachieved, been highly projected, but now you think has a shot to maybe start to pick it up a bit?
Well, I think, aside from Chris Johnson, of course, I think in general you can look at some of the guys, say, in Green Bay. We're used to Aaron Rodgers running that offense and putting up some massive numbers, and really they haven't, broken through yet this year. And so, Greg Jennings, who has been hurt for a bit, but Jordy Nelson, I think any of those wide receivers in Green Bay are kind of prime candidates if you're looking for somebody who, you came into the season with high expectations, but they haven't quite paid off yet. I think, there's a good chance that at some point in the next few weeks that Green Bay is going to start clicking offensively, and you'll start to see some numbers that you were expecting.
Scott Cullen joining us from TSN.ca. We're talking some fantasy football here on the program on Game Points with Matthew Ross. Elsewhere in the NFL, of course, week 4 coming up. You have the Oakland Raiders, who are a very interesting team fantasy-wise, banged up now, of course, on the receiving position, but Darren McFadden coming off his best game of the year. Run DMC, a guy who's hurt off and on in his career. Do you anticipate that production continuing, or is he sort of up and down?
Well, he's definitely risky, right? Because the injuries have really kind of plagued him throughout his career. But when he's healthy, he's such a big part of the Raiders' offense. I think you have to, you certainly have to keep playing him and ride him until you find out that he's hurt or there's some other alternative. You see, in the past years, Michael Bush has been there to take carries away from him, and that really isn't the case right now with the Raiders. They don't have quite the same supporting cast for him. So, I think Darren McFadden's a pretty solid play, and really the Raiders, might be able to pass a little bit better than they have in past years. Not that Carson Palmer is great, but they have some decent receivers. Their tight end Brandon Myers has been quietly effective, and Denarius Moore, who missed the first game of the year, is a pretty decent threat for them at wide receiver. And having a few of those other options, it makes McFadden a little more valuable, because the team needs to move the ball for the running back to really put up good numbers.
TSN Scott Cullen is the Twitter handle if you want to check him out on the social media platform, or you can go to tsn.ca/fantasy. Scott, thanks so much for your time this evening. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Matthew.
All right, there you go. That's Scott Cullen from tsn.ca. It is Game Points here on TSN 690.